At 1:23 in the morning, on April 26, 1986, a routine safety test inside a Soviet power plant went catastrophically wrong. Within seconds, a nuclear reactor exploded, releasing more radioactive material into the atmosphere than the bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki combined. The men on duty that night had no idea they were standing at the center of the worst nuclear accident in human history. How did a test meant to make the plant safer end up poisoning an entire region for generations? This is the story of Chernobyl. In the heart of Soviet Ukraine, just 2 miles from the plant, stood Pripyat, a model city built in 1970 to house the workers of the Chernobyl nuclear power plant and their families. With nearly 50,000 residents, wide boulevards, a Ferris wheel, and modern apartment blocks, Pripyat was designed as a showcase of Soviet engineering and prosperity. Life here revolved around the plant, which supplied roughly 10% of Ukraine's electricity. Few could have imagined that this symbol of progress would soon become a symbol of catastrophe. The Chernobyl nuclear power plant housed 4 RBMK-1000 reactors, a Soviet-designed reactor type known for its high power output, but also for a dangerous design flaw. Unlike Western reactors, the RBMK could become more reactive, not less, if certain safety systems failed at low power. Engineers understood the risks, yet the plant had operated for years without incident, reinforcing a sense of confidence and perhaps complacency among both workers and officials. On the night shift stood Deputy Chief Engineer Anatoly Dyatlov, a demanding supervisor overseeing the test. Alongside him were reactor operators Leonid Toptunov and Alexander Akimov, both relatively young and under pressure to complete a delayed experiment. Elsewhere in the plant, firefighters and technicians went about their normal duties, unaware that within hours, some of them would become first responders to a disaster with no precedent and no established response plan. The purpose of the test was straightforward: to check whether the plant's turbines could generate enough residual power to keep cooling systems running during a power outage, before backup generators kicked in. This safety test had been attempted before and failed. Now, on April 25, 1986, engineers began reducing Reactor 4's power output in preparation. But a sudden request from the regional power grid delayed the shutdown for nearly 10 hours, forcing the night shift, not the day shift that had trained for the test, to carry it out instead. As the night shift resumed the test, the reactor's power dropped far lower than planned, a dangerous zone for an RBMK reactor. In this unstable state, xenon gas began building up inside the core, a natural byproduct that suppresses nuclear reactions. To compensate, operators removed most of the control rods, a move that violated safety protocols. Few outside the room recognized just how precarious the reactor's condition had become. At 1:23 a.m., engineers initiated the test, shutting down steam to the turbine generator. As the turbine slowed, water flow through the reactor decreased and steam levels inside the core began to rise. In an RBMK reactor, rising steam meant rising power, a feedback loop the operators had little ability to control. Sensing danger, senior reactor operator Akimov ordered an emergency shutdown. Pressing the AZ5 button meant to insert all control rods and stop the reaction instantly. Due to a flaw in the control rod design, their initial insertion caused a brief but critical spike in reactivity instead of stopping it. Power surged to many times the reactor's normal output in a matter of seconds. At 1:23:44 a.m., A massive steam explosion ripped through Reactor 4, followed moments later by a second explosion. The 1,000-ton steel and concrete lid covering the reactor was blown off, and the core itself was exposed to the open air. Fires broke out across the reactor hull and roof, fueled by graphite from the reactor core now scattered across the site. Radiation levels near the reactor soared to lethal intensities, though most workers and firefighters arriving on scene did not yet know the true danger they faced. Plant management, trained under a culture that discouraged admitting failure, initially underestimated the severity of the accident, delaying urgent evacuation decisions. Firefighters led by Lieutenant Vladimir Pravik battled the blaze through the night, unaware that the debris around them was highly radioactive. Many would later suffer from acute radiation sickness, and several lost their lives in the weeks that followed. Meanwhile, residents of Pripyat awoke to a Saturday morning with no official warning, going about normal routines just over a mile from the burning reactor. It would take 36 hours before authorities ordered a full evacuation of the city. On April 27th, more than 1,100 buses arrived in Pripyat, evacuating nearly 50,000 residents within hours, and told only that the evacuation would be temporary. It never was. In the following weeks, helicopter pilots flew repeated missions dropping sand, lead, and boron onto the exposed reactor core to smother the fire and absorb radiation. Thousands of miners, soldiers, and civilian workers, later known as liquidators, were mobilized to contain the site, often with limited protective equipment and limited understanding of the risks they faced. 2 days after the explosion, radiation alarms triggered at a nuclear plant in Sweden, over 800 miles away, revealing unusually high radioactive particles in the atmosphere. With no explanation from Moscow, Swedish scientists traced the radioactive cloud back to Soviet territory. Facing mounting international pressure, the Soviet government publicly acknowledged the accident on April 28th, more than 60 hours after the explosion, offering only a brief, vague statement. Subsequent investigations by Soviet and international nuclear agencies identified a combination of reactor design flaws and operational errors as the cause. The RBMK's control rod design, its instability at low power, and a culture that pressured workers to complete the test, despite mounting warning signs, all contributed to the disaster. The International Atomic Energy Agency later concluded that both systemic design issues and human decisions under pressure played critical roles, a conclusion that reshaped nuclear safety standards worldwide. The explosion released radioactive material across large parts of Ukraine, Belarus, and Russia, contaminating land that remains restricted today. An exclusion zone spanning roughly 1,000 square miles was established around the plant, and it remains largely uninhabited nearly 40 years later. The World Health Organization and other agencies have linked the disaster to thousands of thyroid cancer cases, particularly among those who were children at the time. From drinking contaminated milk, the long-term health effects on liquidators and nearby populations remain a subject of ongoing scientific study. Chernobyl fundamentally changed nuclear safety practices worldwide. The disaster led to the redesign of RBMK reactors, stronger international oversight through the IAEA, and greater transparency requirements for nuclear operators. It also became a symbol of the risks of institutional secrecy, showing how delayed information can cost lives. Engineers and policymakers still study Chernobyl today, not as a warning against nuclear energy itself, but as a case study in the importance of design integrity, honest communication, and rigorous safety culture. Chernobyl was not simply a technical failure. It was a chain of small decisions, mounting pressures, and a culture reluctant to admit danger until it was too late. The event forced the world to confront hard truths about nuclear power, government transparency, and the human cost of silence. Nearly 40 years later, the exclusion zone stands as a quiet reminder of what happens when warning signs go unheeded. As we continue to rely on powerful technologies to power our world, Chernobyl asks us, how do we ensure that safety is never sacrificed for convenience or truth for reputation? If you found this story compelling, subscribe for more documentary-style investigations into the events that shaped our world, and share this video with someone who should hear this story.